The moment you understand the game, the people who built it panic. There's a strange shift that happens when you finally connect the dots. Not the dramatic kind, not the movie scene revelation with background music. It's quieter than that, almost disappointing at first. 1 minute you're replaying conversations, situations, odd reactions in your head like you've done 100 times before. And then suddenly, everything lines up. The confusion disappears. The fog lifts. And what replaces it isn't rage, it's clarity. That's when things get interesting. Here's a real, uncomfortable fact most people don't talk about. Manipulation only works on people who haven't yet named it. Once a scheme is identified, it loses over half its power immediately. That's not motivation, that's psychology. Control systems depend on uncertainty, self-doubt, and delayed awareness. The second awareness arrives, the entire structure becomes unstable. That's why things start to feel tense around you when you figure it out. It's not your imagination, it's structural collapse. Now let's be honest, nobody panics when you're confused. Nobody worries when you're apologizing for things you didn't do. Nobody loses sleep when you're busy explaining yourself to people who already decided not to understand you. That version of you was convenient, predictable, easy to steer, but the moment you stop trying to decode them and start decoding the pattern, the energy changes. Suddenly, people act strange, moves become sloppy, stories don't match. The vibe gets awkward. You didn't get cold, you got observant. And here's the funny part. The very people who benefited from you not seeing the scheme are often the ones who accidentally confirm it once you do. They start overperforming concern, repeating themselves, offering explanations nobody asked for. It's like watching someone aggressively explain a magic trick after you've already seen the wire. At that point, it's not mysterious anymore. It's almost comedic. This isn't about revenge. It's not about exposing names or making dramatic exits. This is about the moment you realize that what felt like chaos was actually choreography. And now you can see the steps. That's what scares them. Not what you might say, not what you might do, but the fact that whatever your next move is, it won't be blind. Stay with me, because what you figured out wasn't small, and the reaction you're sensing right now proves it. Number 1, you didn't expose a person. You exposed a system that depended on your confusion. At first, it felt like it was about one person, one voice, one source of tension, one relationship that never quite sat right. That's usually how these things start. Simple, focused, and misleading. Because once you step back and really look, you realize it was never just one individual pulling strings. It was a setup, a structure, a routine that ran quietly in the background while you were busy trying to be fair, patient, and understanding. What made the scheme work wasn't intelligence or power on their side, it was your uncertainty. The system fed off moments where you doubted yourself, replayed conversations, or tried to see things from everyone else's point of view except your own. Confusion wasn't a side effect, it was the fuel. As long as you stayed unsure, the system stayed stable. Everyone knew their role. Everyone benefited in some way, including people who pretended they didn't. The moment you stopped asking, "What's wrong with me?" and started asking, "Why does this pattern keep repeating?" the ground shifted. That question alone was enough to threaten everything. Systems don't collapse because someone gets angry. They collapse because someone gets clear. Clarity exposes shortcuts, double standards, and hidden incentives. It reveals who needs the confusion to continue and who suddenly has nothing to stand on. That's why the energy changed so fast once you saw it. Not because you announced anything, but because you no longer moved the same way. You weren't as easy to steer. You didn't absorb the blame like before. You didn't rush to smooth things over. And when a system senses it's been seen, it panics. It starts making noise. It overcorrects. It exposes itself. What scares them isn't that you know the truth. It's that you now understand how the truth was being buried. You can't unsee a structure once you recognize it. You can't unknow who benefits from your confusion. And that's the real threat. Not exposure, not confrontation, but awareness that rewires how you interpret everything going forward. Once the system loses your confusion, it loses its grip. And that kind of loss isn't temporary. Number 2, the scheme relied on you blaming yourself, and you stopped. For a long time, self-blame felt almost responsible. You thought taking the fault meant you were being mature, fair, or self-aware. When something went wrong, your first instinct wasn't to question the situation. It was to question yourself. What did I miss? What could I have done better? Did I overreact? That habit didn't come from nowhere. It was trained, quietly reinforced every time your discomfort was minimized and every time accountability somehow landed back in your lap. Self-blame is incredibly convenient for people who don't want to change. If you carry the weight, they get to stay comfortable. The scheme needed you to keep internalizing what didn't belong to you. As long as you believed the problem lived inside you, the outside world never had to be examined. And that's how the cycle kept repeating. Same confusion, same outcomes, different explanations. What changed wasn't that you became hardened or defensive. You simply paused long enough to notice a pattern. You realized that no matter how much you adjusted, explained yourself, or tried to improve, the results stayed the same. The issues were always framed as your tone, your timing, your sensitivity, your reaction. The spotlight never moved. That's when it hit you. Growth doesn't feel like constant self-erasure. Accountability doesn't require one person to carry all the weight. The moment you stopped automatically blaming yourself, something subtle but powerful happened. The emotional pressure eased. The endless replaying of conversations slowed down. You started trusting your initial reaction instead of interrogating it. And that's when the fear set in on the other side. Because once you stop absorbing blame that isn't yours, it has nowhere to go. It starts circling. It starts landing where it should have all along. That's why people get uneasy when you no longer apologize for existing. When you don't rush to fix what you didn't break. When you calmly say less, not out of avoidance, but because there's nothing left to defend. The scheme collapses right there. Not with drama, not with speeches, but with the simple, radical decision to stop carrying guilt that was never yours to begin with. Once self-blame is gone, control goes with it. Number 3, you notice the timing, not just the behavior. At first, the behavior alone didn't seem enough to prove anything. People act weird sometimes. Situations get messy. That explanation works. Until you start paying attention to when things happen. Not what was said, not how someone reacted, but the timing. That's where the truth slipped through. You realized the disruptions weren't random. The tension didn't show up on quiet days. It arrived right when you were focused, steady, or moving forward. Every time you gained clarity, confidence, or momentum, something conveniently knocked at the door. A sudden conflict, a strange misunderstanding, an unnecessary emergency. At some point, coincidence stopped being convincing. Timing is harder to fake than behavior. Anyone can put on a mask. Anyone can apologize or explain. But patterns around timing expose intention. You saw that instability appeared right when stability threatened someone's control. The goal wasn't resolution, it was interruption. Break your rhythm, pull your attention, get you back into reaction mode. Once you noticed that, the game changed. You stopped responding to events in isolation. You started connecting dots across weeks, months, even years. The same cycles, the same moments of interference, different packaging, same purpose. That awareness alone stripped the chaos of its emotional power. It stopped feeling personal and started feeling tactical. That's when they got uncomfortable. Because when someone understands timing, they stop being easy to derail. You no longer rush to fix everything the moment it pops up. You pause. You ask yourself, why now? You recognize when something is designed to delay you, distract you, or drain you. And once you see that, urgency loses its grip. They felt the shift immediately, not because you announced anything, but because you weren't as jumpy anymore. You didn't abandon your priorities to manage someone else's sudden crisis. You didn't scramble to prove your intentions. You stayed on course, and for people who relied on your constant availability to interference, that's threatening. Noticing timing turns noise into information. It gives you leverage without confrontation. You're no longer fighting shadows. You're reading the clock. And once you understand when the pressure shows up, you understand why it was there in the first place. That knowledge makes your next move calm, deliberate, and impossible to rush. That's what scared them. Number 4, you realized the confusion was intentional, not accidental. For a long time, you gave people the benefit of the doubt. You assumed mixed signals came from stress, poor communication, or misunderstanding. You thought the contradictions would clear up if you explained yourself better or waited long enough. That belief kept you patient and stuck. Because what you eventually saw was uncomfortable. The confusion wasn't a flaw in the situation. It was the design. Nothing stayed clear for long. Agreements shifted. Stories changed. One day you were praised, the next day questioned. Rules applied until they didn't. When you tried to get clarity, you left with more fog than you arrived with. That wasn't bad luck. That was control. Confused people hesitate. They second guess. They look outward for confirmation. And as long as you were unsure, someone else got to decide what was reasonable. The breakthrough came when you stopped treating each moment as separate and started looking at the outcome. No matter how calm you were, how precise your words were, or how fair your intentions were, the result stayed the same. You walked away doubting yourself. That's when it hit you. If confusion were accidental, it would resolve over time. But it didn't. It deepened. It repeated. It became familiar. Once you named the confusion for what it was, its power dropped instantly. You didn't need every answer anymore. You didn't need perfect explanations. You understood that clarity wasn't being withheld because it was hard to give. It was being withheld because it was dangerous to give. Clear situations limit manipulation. Clear agreements create accountability. Confusion keeps the door open. That realization changed how you moved. You stopped chasing closure that was never coming. You stopped over-explaining yourself into exhaustion. You started trusting what made sense instead of forcing yourself to accept what didn't. And that shift unsettled the people who benefited from the fog. They sensed it right away. Not because you confronted them, but because you stopped playing along. You didn't argue inside their maze anymore. You stepped outside it. And once you do that, confusion loses its grip. It can't trap someone who refuses to stay disoriented. What scared them wasn't that you demanded clarity. It was that you no longer needed it from them to move forward. Number 5. You understood that being misunderstood was part of the plan. For years, you felt like people just didn't get you. You over-explained, clarified, and justified, trying to bridge gaps that seemed impossible to cross. It was exhausting, frustrating, and often humiliating. You thought it was bad luck, personality clashes, or maybe your own inability to communicate. But then it became clear. Being misunderstood wasn't an accident. It was intentional. It was part of a strategy carefully crafted to keep you off balance and silent. They needed the world to see a version of you that wasn't accurate, a version that could be questioned, doubted, or dismissed. Every misinterpretation, every exaggeration, every subtle twist of your words served a purpose. It created isolation, without them ever appearing aggressive. People would look at you and hesitate, unsure what was real, because the narrative around you had been carefully edited behind the scenes. Their success relied on the world doubting your integrity, your intentions, or your clarity. When you realized this, a quiet power replaced frustration. You no longer wasted energy trying to convince people who had already been conditioned to misinterpret you. You started observing instead of defending, taking note of who perpetuated the narrative and why. That's when things shifted. You were no longer a participant in the distortion. You were an observer of the mechanics that made it possible. The fear they felt when you noticed it was immediate and undeniable. The system they had built to control perception depended on your own self-doubt. Once you stopped internalizing their misrepresentations, the narrative lost its stability. The carefully planted misunderstandings no longer stuck. You were now moving in a space where your truth mattered more than their spin, and that was something they hadn't accounted for. Being misunderstood had been their weapon, but by seeing it as a tactic rather than a personal failure, you disarmed it completely. That's why the energy around you changed. Not because you shouted your truth, but because you refused to live in their edited version of reality. Once that happens, the fear is no longer subtle. It becomes obvious, raw, and inescapable for anyone who relied on keeping you misrepresented. Number 6. You stopped trying to correct the narrative and started observing who believed it. For the longest time, you felt responsible for everyone's perception of you. Every misunderstanding, every distorted story, every rumor felt like a personal failure that needed fixing. You argued, explained, overshared, and apologized, thinking that clarity would restore balance. But the system was never designed to let you win that way. The narrative wasn't a reflection of reality. It was a tool to keep you reactive, exhausted, and distracted. The moment you stopped chasing approval or validation, everything changed. Instead of fighting for belief, you started watching. You noted who accepted the distortions without question, who questioned them, and who benefited from them. That shift from reaction to observation gave you a perspective they couldn't anticipate. You saw patterns in behavior, alliances forming, and cracks in the storylines they tried to enforce. You weren't just aware, you were analyzing the mechanics of control. Observation gave you power they could never take away. It allowed you to predict moves before they happened, see desperation hidden behind charm, and recognize when someone's concern was strategic rather than genuine. You became untouchable not because you argued louder, but because you stopped investing energy in a game that was never meant to be fair. The narrative lost its weight once you refused to carry it for them. They noticed immediately. People who thrived on your attempts to explain yourself began panicking. Subtle manipulations no longer landed because you weren't playing the same game. Their stories began to unravel not through confrontation, but through your quiet detachment and analytical clarity. This is the point where control flips. When you observe rather than defend, you see who's loyal, who's opportunistic, and who's scared. And once you understand that, your next move isn't a reaction, it's a strategy. You no longer need to correct the narrative because you understand who actually matters and who will crumble under their own lies. The system that depended on your participation begins to falter, and that's when fear becomes palpable. They can sense it, they can feel it, and that fear is yours to watch unfold. Number 7. You saw that your emotional reactions were being harvested. For a long time, every time you got frustrated, hurt, or angry, it felt personal, like the weight of your emotions was yours alone to carry. You thought your reactions were private, that they only affected you. But eventually, the pattern became undeniable. Every flare-up, every tear, every moment of vulnerability wasn't just noticed. It was being studied, logged, and used. Your emotions weren't just feelings, they were data points, feeding a system designed to predict your next move, anticipate your weak spots, and manipulate your behavior. The subtlety of it is what makes it so dangerous. It wasn't always blatant. Sometimes it was a remark meant to provoke, a delay in response, a slight shift in tone. Other times, it was people carefully observing how you handled conflict, measuring how far they could push before you reacted. The emotional energy you gave off was literally being harvested, transformed into leverage. And while you were trying to make sense of situations, they were building an invisible map of your triggers. The moment you realized this, everything changed. You stopped feeding the system. You started noticing when situations were designed to provoke, when responses were being tested, and when attention was being used as a weapon. You didn't react the way you used to. You paused. You contained your energy. You decided what deserved engagement and what was just noise. That simple act of reclaiming your emotional data broke the cycle. Once your reactions were no longer accessible, fear began to ripple through those who had relied on them. They lost their blueprint. Their predictions failed. The advantage they had built over time vanished because you refused to be a source of information anymore. Understanding this isn't about detachment or coldness. It's about clarity and control. Your emotions are yours to direct, not theirs to exploit. When you realize that, you step out of the predictable patterns they counted on. And that is when the power truly flips. When they can no longer anticipate your next move, they start scrambling. That scramble is your evidence that you are no longer playing by their rules. Number 8. You realized the attack wasn't personal. Your potential was the trigger. For a long time it felt personal because it was aimed directly at you. The criticism, the resistance, the quiet undermining, all of it landed on your life, your name, your character. Naturally, you assumed it must be about something you did wrong, but the deeper truth was far less emotional and far more revealing. The pressure didn't start because you failed. It started because you were moving forward in ways that couldn't be controlled. People don't scheme against stagnation. They don't invest energy into blocking someone who poses no disruption. What triggered the shift was your trajectory. Your growth created imbalance. Your clarity challenged comfort. Your ability to adapt threatened people who relied on things staying exactly the same. So the focus turned to slowing you down, questioning you, exhausting you. Not because you were flawed, but because you were becoming unpredictable in the best way. Once you saw this, the shame fell apart. You stopped internalizing attacks as proof of inadequacy and started seeing them as resistance to change. The same qualities that attracted pressure were the qualities that signaled expansion. Your insight, your resilience, your refusal to stay small. That realization reframed everything. What once felt like rejection started to look like confirmation. This is where fear enters on their side, because when someone understands that they were targeted for their potential, they stop shrinking. They stop negotiating their growth to keep others comfortable. They stop mistaking opposition for failure. And that kind of clarity makes you hard to manage. You didn't need applause to validate your direction anymore. You didn't need permission. You understood that the discomfort around you wasn't accidental. It was feedback. Feedback that something in you was advancing beyond the limits others had set. That's why the tone changed. That's why resistance escalated instead of easing. They weren't responding to who you were. They were reacting to who you were becoming. And once you understood that, the attacks lost their sting. You stopped asking how to fit in and started focusing on where you were going. When someone realizes they were never the problem, only the catalyst, their entire posture shifts. And that shift is what truly unsettles those who hoped you'd stay manageable. Number 9, you identified the gaslighting by tracking outcomes, not words. For the longest time, you focused on what people said. You listened to their explanations, promises, and apologies, hoping the words would match the reality. You replayed conversations in your head, analyzing tone, phrasing, and intent. And for years, it felt exhausting because something never added up. The logic of the situation didn't match what was being communicated. That's when you realized the problem wasn't in what they said. It was in the outcomes. Gaslighting thrives on this disconnect. Words can be controlled, edited, repeated, and polished. But outcomes, actions, patterns, and results don't lie. They reveal what people are actually willing to do versus what they claim. Once you started measuring reality instead of memorizing explanations, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Promises never followed through. Apologies weren't accompanied by change. Commitments were only temporary. The story didn't match the results, and suddenly it all made sense. That's when clarity hit. You stopped arguing over words. You stopped trying to convince people that the way things felt to you was real. Instead, you started observing patterns. You noticed who consistently failed to uphold their own standards, who shifted blame, and who manipulated perception while pretending accountability. Tracking outcomes removed ambiguity. It revealed manipulation without needing anyone to admit it. And once you trusted the evidence in front of you, the gaslighting lost its hold. You were no longer second-guessing yourself because the reality of actions spoke louder than any words ever could. You became immune to excuses, justifications, and performances designed to confuse. That's when their fear became tangible. Gaslighters rely on your uncertainty. They need you doubting yourself to keep control. When you stop doubting and start tracking outcomes, they scramble. They over-explain, overcompensate, and expose their strategy without realizing it. You've shifted from reacting to observing, from defending to calculating. And in that shift, you reclaim the narrative entirely. Once you start seeing the truth in what actually happens, no words can manipulate you. The scheme crumbles quietly, inevitably, and without drama. And that's exactly what terrifies them. Number 10. You noticed how nervous they became when you stopped oversharing. Oversharing once felt natural to you. You talked things through, explained your thoughts, shared your worries, and let people see inside your head. You thought openness built trust, and in healthy spaces, it does. But in this situation, your openness became access. Every detail you shared helped someone stay one step ahead of you. Your thoughts became leverage. Your doubts became tools. Your plans became something to interfere with before they even had a chance to grow. When you stopped oversharing, it wasn't because you became secretive or guarded out of fear. It happened because you no longer felt the need to justify yourself. You realized that not everyone needed a front-row seat to your inner world, and that's when the shift happened. Suddenly, people seemed unsettled. Conversations felt awkward. They asked more questions than usual. They filled silence with nervous explanations. The energy changed. What made them uneasy wasn't the lack of information, it was the loss of control. When you used to talk freely, they could predict you. They knew what mattered to you, what hurt you, what you were planning. Once that stream dried up, they were left guessing. And people who rely on information to manage outcomes do not like guessing. You also noticed how quickly assumptions replaced understanding. When you shared less, others projected more. That alone told you everything. The discomfort wasn't about connection. It was about access. Your inner world had been a resource, and you quietly closed the door without announcing it. What's powerful is that you didn't have to confront anyone to see this. Their behavior revealed it for you. The nervous laughter, the probing questions disguised as concern, the sudden need to check in. It wasn't warmth, it was recalibration. By keeping parts of yourself private, you didn't lose power. You gained it. You moved without interference. You thought without outside noise. You decided without someone else steering the outcome. And once you experienced that clarity, there was no going back. They fear this version of you because they can no longer read ahead. They can't anticipate your reactions. They can't prepare for your next move. And that uncertainty makes them restless, exposed, and visibly uncomfortable. All because you stopped telling them everything. Number 11. You saw how quickly they scrambled to regain relevance. Once you started stepping out of their predictable patterns, you noticed something remarkable. The sudden flurry of activity, the desperate attempts to reinsert themselves into your orbit. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't accidental. The same people who had ignored, dismissed, or undermined you suddenly became overly attentive, overly helpful, overly apologetic. Their behavior screamed one thing: panic. They realized their previous influence was slipping, and now they had to prove it still mattered. This scramble isn't about genuine concern or care. It's a reaction to losing control. People who have relied on keeping you reactive or dependent don't know how to respond when that influence evaporates. They start overcompensating, sometimes with unnecessary gestures, sudden check-ins, or over-explaining things that didn't need explanation. Their timing is always off, their efforts exaggerated, their urgency unnatural. That's because influence doesn't disappear quietly. It has to be reasserted, and when they can't do it subtly, it becomes visible to anyone paying attention. What makes this shift fascinating is that it confirms exactly what you suspected all along. The scramble is proof that your presence, clarity, and independence have disrupted a carefully maintained structure. They are afraid of your next move, not because of what you've done, but because they understand that your trajectory cannot be steered the way it once was. Their desperation becomes a mirror, an unintentional confession that you've broken the predictability they relied on. You don't need to react to their scramble. In fact, reacting on their terms would be exactly what they want. The real power is in observing, noting patterns, and letting the panic reveal its own cracks. Their urgency exposes their dependence on your engagement, their need for control, and the weakness of their previous influence. That scramble is loud, awkward, and often clumsy. And that's perfect because it's a confirmation of your independence. They are trying to regain relevance in a space you no longer allow them to dominate. Every overreach, every unnecessary check-in, every desperate explanation is a reminder. They feared your clarity, and that fear is now unmistakably visible. Number 12. You realized that your next move didn't need to be dramatic to be devastating. Once you understood the system, once you saw the patterns, and once you reclaimed your clarity, you recognized a truth most people miss. You don't need fireworks to shift the game. The most effective moves are quiet, deliberate, and informed. They aren't about proving a point or lashing out. They're about positioning yourself where you belong while letting the consequences of your awareness play out naturally. That subtlety terrifies people who thrived on chaos because it's unpredictable, precise, and unstoppable in ways they can't manipulate. Before this realization, it was tempting to respond in kind to the manipulation, to shout, to expose, to make a scene. But those reactions are visible, obvious, and easy to counter. What's truly devastating is restraint paired with insight. You start making decisions that strengthen you without needing permission. You stop explaining, defending, or over-engaging. You don't need to win arguments, you just move forward. And your forward movement, informed by awareness, dismantles the influence that once relied on your confusion. The beauty of this approach is that it flips the narrative without you needing to touch it directly. Every calculated choice you make, every boundary you enforce, and every piece of energy you reclaim becomes evidence that the system that tried to control you is failing. You don't have to shout to show power. You just live with precision, and the cracks appear on their own. That's why fear escalates around this stage. They don't know what your next move will be, but they know it will matter. It won't be performative, it will be effective, it won't be loud, it will be undeniable. And that uncertainty is unbearable for anyone who relied on predictability and reaction. The lesson is simple, yet profound. Awareness is the ultimate leverage. You don't need chaos to prove your point. You don't need confrontation to reclaim your space. The quiet, calculated steps forward are enough to shift the balance, expose the weaknesses of the system, and make everyone who underestimated you realize that the power they feared was never in them. It was in your clarity all along. Number 13. You recognized that distance was more dangerous to them than confrontation. For years, you treated confrontation as the ultimate test. You thought standing up, arguing, or proving yourself was where power lay. But as you observed the system, you realized something deeper. Distance, not drama, is far more destabilizing. When you disengage, when you step back and refuse to play by their rules, the impact is silent, strategic, and terrifying to those who thrived on your energy. They don't just lose influence in that moment, they start scrambling to regain access to what they've lost. Distance exposes reliance. People who rely on your reaction, attention, or involvement can't handle absence. Without your participation, their control becomes visible, fragile, and unsustainable. The subtle manipulations, the strategic gaslighting, the emotional harvesting, all of it loses its efficiency when you are no longer available to feed the system. And because they've never had to operate without that access, the discomfort is palpable, almost frantic. The beauty of this realization is that it doesn't require aggression or confrontation. You don't need to prove them wrong. You don't need to issue ultimatums or explanations. You simply redirect your energy, focus on your own clarity, and allow the absence to do the work. Every time you remain composed, disengaged, and strategic, you strip the system of its power. Their panic isn't visible at first, but small slips, overcompensation, and desperate attempts to regain connection reveal the truth. They were dependent on your presence. Distance flips the script because it turns their leverage into weakness. What they counted on, your participation, your engagement, your reactions, becomes irrelevant. And in that irrelevance, the hierarchy they built starts to collapse. You're no longer playing the game they designed, you're operating outside it. Once you understand this, the fear becomes obvious. They realize that confrontation wouldn't have done half the damage that your quiet withdrawal does. Distance, observation, and selective engagement are far more potent than any loud declaration. And that silent disruption is exactly what terrifies them, because they can no longer control the narrative, manipulate outcomes, or predict your next move. Number 14. You realized the scheme collapsed the moment you trusted your perception. For a long time, you didn't lack intelligence or awareness. You lacked permission. Permission to believe what you were seeing without running it through someone else's approval first. You sensed things early, but you overrode your instincts because you were taught to doubt yourself, to be fair, to wait for more evidence, to give people the benefit of the doubt even when your body was already warning you. That delay is where the scheme lived. Everything changed the moment you stopped outsourcing your perception. You didn't need more proof. You didn't need a confession. You didn't need consensus. You simply allowed yourself to say, "I see what's happening, and that's enough." That decision collapsed the entire structure, because the scheme was never built to survive awareness. It was built to survive hesitation. Once you trusted your perception, the confusion evaporated. You no longer replayed conversations endlessly. You no longer tried to decode hidden meanings or search for alternative explanations that made others look better at your expense. What felt heavy before suddenly felt obvious. And when something becomes obvious, it loses its power to manipulate. That's when the fear truly set in on their side. Because perception is the one thing that can't be negotiated, managed, or rewritten once it's reclaimed. They could twist words, they could delay answers, they could shift blame, but they couldn't make you unsee what you finally trusted yourself to recognize. Your posture changed without you trying. Your responses shortened. Your decisions came faster. Your tolerance dropped naturally. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You weren't hardened, you were aligned. And alignment makes manipulation impossible because it removes the internal conflict manipulators depend on. The scheme didn't end with exposure. It didn't end with confrontation. It ended quietly, internally, the moment you stopped doubting your own awareness. From that point on, everything else was just fallout. That's why they're scared of your next move. Not because it will be loud or aggressive, but because it will be rooted in perception you now trust. And once someone trusts themselves fully, no external system can ever regain control over them again. Conclusion. By the time you reach this point, it's clear. What you faced wasn't random chaos, a string of unfortunate events or personal vendettas. It was a meticulously crafted system designed to keep you reactive, confused, and doubting yourself. Every misdirection, every contradiction, every subtle manipulation had a purpose. And the most remarkable truth is this: you saw through it. You didn't just survive the scheme, you unraveled it from the inside out. You identified the patterns, reclaimed your emotional energy, and refused to let uncertainty dictate your actions. You stopped blaming yourself. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped participating in the narrative they relied on, and in doing so, you became untouchable in a way they never anticipated. The power you now hold isn't flashy. It doesn't rely on drama, confrontation, or revenge. It comes from clarity, from observation, from trusting your own perception when the system was built to make you question it at every turn. Each move you make now is deliberate, informed, and strategic. The panic, the overcompensation, the nervous recalibration you see from those who tried to control you is the proof of your awakening. The same forces that once sought to manipulate your thoughts and your life are now exposed, scrambling in ways that confirm exactly how powerful your awareness is. This isn't just a victory, it's a transformation. You've turned every attempt to destabilize you into a map, every doubt they planted into evidence, and every moment of interference into an opportunity to move with precision. You are no longer operating within the system they created. You're operating outside it, on your own terms. And that shift changes everything. If this message resonates with you, if you feel the weight of what you've just realized and want more insights like this, make sure to take action. Subscribe to the channel for more content that uncovers the hidden layers of power, manipulation, and truth. Like this video to show you're ready to step into your clarity. Comment below with your thoughts, experiences, or breakthroughs. Let's build a community of awareness. And share this with someone who needs to see it, because awareness grows when it's shared. This isn't just a video, it's a movement. You've already started walking the path. Now, keep going. God bless you.